Hey everybody, it's Scott and welcome to the X-Fed Homestead. So I've been waiting to do this composting. I got a number of secret ingredients that I use, and I'm looking forward to getting that done before the fall. So all the composting can happen and can be contained for the winter. So I'm looking forward to doing all of that today. So let's get started.
Now, first of all, let me convince you of the power of composting. Here's a video I took earlier this year of a patch of squash that came up voluntarily in a compost pile. This is the exact spot I had my small chicken tractor with 3 chickens in deep bedding for 4 months this past winter. If you look at the size of the leaves on the squash, they're huge. Now, I'm walking over to my garden and grabbing the biggest, healthiest squash leaf that I can find there. I walk back to the volunteer squash and place that leaf on top of the volunteer squash. And you can see that the volunteer squash leaf is easily twice as big as the garden squash. And remember, the garden squash was planted over a month earlier than when the volunteer squash began to grow on its own. That is the power of compost. So now I hope you're convinced about how good compost is for your garden. So, a few videos ago, I showed how I cleaned out my chicken coop and briefly mentioned how I used the chicken manure to make compost. Now I want to show you how to make fantastic compost in more depth. And you'll see what I didn't show in that other video.
Now you may not have seen it from up there, but I dug out all the compost that was in this particular bin and put it on the garden already. And I dug it a foot deeper than the actual base of the compost bins because all the nutrients from the compost leaches into the soil. And I could tell because you go down a foot and there are worms everywhere. So you know that's the good stuff. So I took that out and filled it up with this carbon. And now I'm going to layer nitrogen on top of that, some plants, some dead plants, maybe some soil with some worms in it. And over here is my special ingredient, which I'll show you in a second. That really makes it a great compost. Now, this plastic barrel here, and this holds the food scraps that we put in here all year long. So these food scraps have been in here for months, just waiting for this time. And so it screws into the base here so animals can't get up through the bottom. So you just unscrew these plastic screws down here. You can see it's a fairly coarse thread to go in the ground. And once you do all 4 of them, you can lift it up. And it'll give you a nice pile of rotted food that you can throw on your compost and make one of those lasagna layers. There we go. Now there are plenty of bugs and flying insects in here every time you open it to put more compost in, but those are the things that help it break down over time. And you know, carbon and green stuff is fantastic, but this food waste is a valuable resource for composters, and we get it all back in the garden. Once this stuff goes on the garden, it grows again, and that's the circle of life that keeps continuing. So I'm happy to contribute to that. So if I pull the top off this, can see, this was full, and now it's crunched down into about 1.5 foot of really dense, nutritious compost material. So I'm going to layer this on top of the carbon, on top of the pine shavings, on top of the chicken manure, and I'll throw in some grass. You don't want to use a lot of grass because grass will mat down and kind of stall the process. So very light on the grass clippings, but I do throw some in there, and that should make a great compost. Oh, that's dense. Now in the composting world, you hear a lot about carbon to nitrogen ratios and, 30 to 1 or 20 to 1 or 50 to 1 carbon to nitrogen. That just tells me you can't go wrong with most of what you do. And I don't know exactly what proportion I do it. It's probably 20 to 1, 25, 30 to 1 as far as weight goes. This is particularly dense. Look at that. That's the good stuff, friends. And I spread it over in a layer, just like my Italian mother-in-law makes lasagna. Good layers of the thick stuff. So a couple of layers, pine shavings, chicken manure, old food scraps that have been breaking down, a little bit of grass, and now over here in this bin over here, most of it's gone because it was leaves from last fall, and they were 4 or 5 feet high, and over the year in the winter and then this year they just compressed down into almost nothing. I throw it in with the chickens, I spread it on the garden, but there are a few left. I'll use that to help compost. In the fall, collect your leaves from your yard, nearby forest, or wherever, and I stack them up in a round bin here, and every year I move it to a different spot, and every year those spots are very fertile. So can't go wrong with leaf mold as it breaks down over the year, and it doesn't take up that much space. And I only have an acre property here. I can spare the room. So then some more of the secret ingredient. You know what that is now. Save all year, saving up your food scraps, and they go real quick when you put them in the compost pile. Now the other thing you can do is throw any plants that are used up from the garden in the fall. We rip out all the bushes and all the tomato plants, zucchinis, squash vines, and all that stuff goes in the compost pile. And it gets covered up with more of this stuff. And one thing I neglected is I'll put water on all of this as well to help it break down. Drown it out a little bit, not too much, and get it nice and moist. And then I cover it up. And when I cover it up, It just gives all the microorganisms, the worms, and all the critters in the soil a chance to do their thing over the course of time. And I'll come back in the spring ready to spread this stuff on the garden. It's going to be a beautiful thing, trust me. Here are a bunch of vines. I'll just throw those right in there. They'll take time, but they're going to break down too. And I'll keep covering those up, and I'll spread what I have amongst the other bins that I have going already. So we'll have a lot of compost next year, and it's going to be great. It's nice taking waste product and turning it into something good.